My mother told me, "It's time you learned independence and stopped relying on us." So I smiled, nodded quietly, and sent invoices for the $500,000 I'd spent on their house, cars, and medical bills over 10 years. Before we begin, take a moment to subscribe, say hello below, and tell us where you're watching from. Your support truly means everything. Let's continue. The words hung in the air like smoke after a gunshot. "It's time you learned independence and stopped relying on us," my mother said, her arms crossed, standing in the kitchen I'd renovated with my own money 3 years ago. I felt my coffee mug grow warm in my hands as I processed what she'd just said. Me? Relying on them? I looked at her silk blouse, the one I'd bought her last Christmas when she complained her wardrobe looked dated. Behind her, through the bay window I'd paid to install, I could see my father's Mercedes, the one whose monthly payments came directly from my account. "Excuse me," I managed to say, my voice steady despite the storm building inside my chest. "You heard me, Lorna," she continued, her tone sharp and dismissive. "You're 32 years old and you're still here every weekend, still calling us for every little decision. It's embarrassing. Your sister has her own life. Your brother doesn't need to come running home constantly." My sister. My brother. The same siblings who hadn't contributed a single dollar to our parents' lives in over a decade. I felt something crack inside me, not break but shift like tectonic plates realigning before an earthquake. I set down my mug carefully, precisely on the granite countertop I'd selected and paid for during the kitchen remodel. "You think I rely on you," I repeated slowly, tasting each word. "We love you, but it's unhealthy," my father chimed in from his recliner, not even bothering to look up from his tablet, the one I'd given him last Father's Day. I smiled. Actually smiled. Because in that moment I understood exactly what I needed to do. 10 years ago I was a different person. Fresh out of college with my engineering degree, landing a 6-figure job at a tech company, I was so eager to give back. I remember the day I got my first real paycheck. $8,333.33 after taxes, direct deposited on a bright Friday morning. I'd called my mother immediately, tears of joy streaming down my face. "Mama, I made it," I'd whispered into the phone. "We made it." She'd cried too. My parents had sacrificed so much, working double shifts, skipping meals, ensuring I had tutors and opportunities. My father's hands were calloused from 20 years of factory work. My mother's feet ached from standing behind retail counters. They'd given me everything and now it was my turn. "Baby girl, you don't owe us anything," my mother had said that day, her voice thick with emotion. "I want to," I'd insisted. "Let me help. Please." It started small. $100 here for groceries. $300 there for a utility bill they'd mentioned struggling with. Then my father's car broke down. The transmission shot, repair costs estimated at $4,000. "Don't worry about it," I'd said, handing them a check. "Consider it an early Christmas present." The gratitude in their eyes had fueled me. I worked harder, took on extra projects, earned bonuses and promotions. Every dollar felt like repayment for their years of sacrifice. I was building something beautiful, I thought. A legacy of family love and mutual support. I had no idea I was actually constructing my own prison, brick by expensive brick. The house situation started innocuously enough. 3 years into my career, my parents' landlord decided to sell the property they'd rented for 15 years. They had 60 days to find a new place, and my mother was beside herself with worry. "Everything in our budget is in terrible neighborhoods," she'd explained over dinner, her hands wringing a napkin into shreds. "I don't know what we're going to do." I remember looking at their worried faces, at the gray in my father's hair that hadn't been there a few years ago, at my mother's trembling hands. The decision felt obvious, felt right. What if we bought a house? I'd suggested. I could get a mortgage. You could live there and just cover the utilities and maintenance. The explosion of relief and joy was intoxicating. My mother hugged me so tightly I couldn't breathe. My father's eyes glistened with tears. "Are you sure, Lorna? That's a huge commitment." "I'm sure," I'd said, though my savings account would be decimated by the down payment. We found a beautiful 3-bedroom house in a safe neighborhood with good schools. "Thinking of future grandchildren," my mother had said with a wink. The mortgage was $2,800 monthly, but I was making good money. I could handle it. I wanted to handle it. The day we closed, my entire family was there. My parents, my sister Jade, my brother Alvin. Everyone was celebrating, taking pictures, talking about paint colors and furniture arrangements. I was the hero of the day. Nobody mentioned that I was the only one signing papers, the only name on the deed, the only one responsible for the debt I'd just taken on. Strange how obligations creep up on you. Like gaining weight. You don't notice it happening until suddenly your clothes don't fit and you're wondering when exactly everything changed. The house was just the beginning. 6 months after they moved in, the water heater broke. Then the AC unit needed replacing. The roof had a leak. Each repair was unexpected and couldn't have been predicted. I wouldn't ask if it wasn't an emergency, my mother would say, and I'd transfer another $1,000, another $2,000, another $5,000 to cover whatever crisis had emerged. Then came my father's diabetes diagnosis. The medication was expensive even with insurance. Just until we figure out our budget, he'd promised, but months became years and I was still paying for his insulin, his test strips, his doctor's appointments. My brother Alvin got into a car accident, his fault, no insurance. Just this once, he'd pleaded. I'll pay you back, I swear. I covered the $12,000 in damages. I never saw a penny returned. My sister Jade wanted to start a business. A boutique. You believe in me, right? She'd asked with those big hopeful eyes. I'd invested $25,000. The business folded within 8 months. She never apologized, just said, well, most startups fail, as if my money had been a lottery ticket rather than my hard-earned savings. I was making great money by then, nearly $200,000 annually with bonuses, but I lived in a tiny one-bedroom apartment, drove a 10-year-old Honda and had zero savings. Every dollar went to my family. The truth came crashing down on a random Tuesday afternoon. I was at my parents' house fixing their Wi-Fi router. They'd called it an emergency, when I overheard them talking in the kitchen. They didn't know I was still there, thought I'd left already. I can't believe she just gives us money whenever we ask, my brother Alvin said, his voice filled with amusement, not gratitude. It's like having a personal ATM. Don't say it like that, my mother replied, but she was laughing. Actually laughing. She wants to help. She's always been that way, eager to please, desperate for approval. My hands froze on the router. Desperate for approval? Is that what they thought? I told Jennifer that Lorna's covering Mom and Dad's mortgage. My sister Jade chimed in. She couldn't believe it. She was like, why don't you help? And I was like, Lorna has it covered. Why would I? The laughter that followed was casual, comfortable, like they were discussing the weather, not my financial sacrifice over nearly a decade. My father's voice joined in. She's doing well for herself. She can afford it. Better her than us, Alvin added. I've got my own bills. Something cold and hard settled in my chest. Not anger yet, that would come later. This was worse. This was clarity, sharp and cutting as broken glass. They weren't grateful. They felt entitled. I wasn't their daughter helping out of love. I was a resource to be exploited, a well that would never run dry. I left without saying goodbye, my whole body numb. That night I couldn't sleep. I pulled out my banking records and started calculating. I spent the entire weekend with spreadsheets, bank statements, and receipts spread across my apartment floor. Every transaction, every transfer, every check I'd written over the past 10 years. What I discovered made me physically ill. The house, $336,000 in mortgage payments over 10 years. Repairs and renovations, $89,000. Property taxes I'd covered when they said they forgot, $43,000. Total house expenses, $468,000. My father's medical expenses, $67,000. My mother's dental work, glasses and medications, $31,000. Total health care, $98,000. Cars. Got the cars. My father's Mercedes payments when he decided his 15-year-old sedan was embarrassing, $47,000 over 4 years. My mother's SUV, $38,000 over 3 years. Insurance I'd added them to because it was cheaper. $14,000. Repairs and maintenance. $21,000. Total automotive. $120,000. Alvin's bail money from his DUI. $5,000. His loans that were never repaid. $34,000. Jade's failed business. $25,000. Her credit card debt I'd paid off. $18,000. Her destination wedding in Mexico that I'd funded. $22,000. Total sibling support. $104,000. Miscellaneous. Groceries, utilities, vacations, emergency funds, holiday gifts, furniture, electronics. $76,000. Grand total. $866,000. $866,000. Over 10 years I had given my family nearly $1 million. Money I could have used for my own house, my own retirement, my own dreams. I sat on my apartment floor, surrounded by evidence of my own financial martyrdom, and finally let myself cry. Monday morning I called in sick to work. I didn't trust myself to focus. Instead, I sat in my apartment and thought about what came next. Part of me wanted to confront them immediately, to scream and rage about the betrayal. But I'd learned something in my corporate career. Emotion makes you vulnerable. Facts make you powerful. I spent the day consulting with a lawyer. Do I have any legal recourse? I asked, sliding my documentation across her desk. Attorney Faye Morrison reviewed everything with sharp, intelligent eyes. She was a black woman in her 50s, with silver braids and a no-nonsense demeanor that immediately put me at ease. The house is in your name? You have documentation of all payments? She asked. Everything, I confirmed. Here's the reality, Faye said, leaning back. Legally, these were likely gifts. Unless you have written agreements stating they were loans, you can't force repayment. However, she held up a finger as my heart sank, you can stop all future payments immediately. The house is yours. You can sell it, rent it, or move into it yourself. You have zero obligation to continue support. What if I invoice them? I asked. Not to actually collect, but to make a point? Faye's smile was knowing. An invoice isn't legally binding without a prior agreement, but as a statement of account, it's a powerful psychological tool. It shows them exactly what you've sacrificed. Whether they acknowledge it is another matter. I left her office with a plan. That evening I created detailed invoices, professional, itemized, with dates and amounts. Each line item a memory, a sacrifice, a piece of my financial future I'd handed over willingly. I didn't call ahead. The following Sunday I showed up for our usual family dinner with a manila folder tucked under my arm. My mother was in her element, cooking in the kitchen I'd renovated, humming along to gospel music. My father sat in his expensive recliner. Jade and Alvin were already there, lounging comfortably in the home I'd provided. Lorna, my mother exclaimed, pulling me into a hug. You're late. I was worried. We need to talk, I said, my voice calm. All of us. Family meeting. Something in my tone made everyone settle into the living room. I remained standing, pulling documents from my folder. 10 years ago I got my first real job, I began. I wanted to help because you'd sacrificed for me. I was grateful and I wanted to give back. I laid the first invoice on the coffee table. This is every payment I've made on this house. $468,000. My mother's face paled. Lorna, what? I'm not done. Second invoice. Healthcare expenses for mom and dad. $98,000. Third invoice. Cars, insurance, repairs. $120,000. Fourth and fifth. Alvin and Jade. $104,000 combined. Final document. Miscellaneous support. $76,000. Total. $866,000. The silence was deafening. Alvin looked at the papers like they were written in a foreign language. Jade's mouth hung open. My father couldn't meet my eyes. 3 days ago I overheard you, I continued, looking at my mother. You called me desperate for approval. You laughed about me being your personal ATM. You felt entitled to my money, not grateful for my sacrifice. Baby, let me explain. My mother started. No. The word came out harder than I'd intended. You told me I rely on you. That I need to learn independence. So I'm taking your advice. I pulled out a final document, a formal notice I'd had Faye prepare. Effective immediately, I'm stopping all financial support. The mortgage will continue to be paid because my credit depends on it, but I'm selling this house. You have 90 days to find new housing. You can't be serious. Alvin jumped up, anger flooding his face. You're putting them on the street? I'm giving them 90 days notice, which is 30 more than legally required, I replied coldly. The same notice your landlord gave you 10 years ago when this all started. Lorna, please. My mother's voice cracked and I saw tears forming. Part of me wanted to cave to take it all back. That part had kept me trapped for a decade. I've paid for your cars outright. They're yours free and clear. I've supported this family more than most people earn in a lifetime. You'll be fine. You'll just have to actually budget for once. This is about what we said. My father finally spoke, his voice defensive. You're going to throw away family over words? No, Dad. I'm choosing myself over people who saw me as an ATM. There's a difference. Jade found her voice. You always held this over our heads, didn't you? Every dollar you were keeping score. I wasn't keeping score, I said quietly. I was keeping records. And I only pulled them out after you made it clear you felt entitled to my sacrifice rather than grateful for it. We are grateful, my mother tried. You laughed about manipulating me. You mocked my generosity behind my back. That's not gratitude. That's exploitation. The pain in the room was palpable, but I felt something else too, liberation. The chains I'd wrapped around myself were finally breaking. The days following the confrontation were brutal. My phone exploded with messages, angry texts from Alvin, crying voicemails from my mother, long emails from Jade trying to gaslight me into believing I'd misunderstood what I'd heard. My father sent a single text, "You've broken your mother's heart. I hope you're happy." I wasn't happy. I was devastated. But I was also free in a way I hadn't been in 10 years. Then the flying monkeys descended. Aunts and uncles I hadn't heard from in years suddenly had opinions. Family takes care of family, they lectured, not knowing I'd been the only one taking care of anyone. Cousins posted vague Facebook statuses about ungrateful children. My mother's church friends called me selfish. The worst was my grandmother. At 83, she was the family matriarch, and her disappointment cut deeper than anyone else's. "Baby girl, I raised you better than this," she said when I visited her nursing home. A visit I'd been making weekly for years, usually bringing groceries and paying for her prescriptions. "Grandma, did they tell you what happened?" I asked gently. "Your mama's crying every day. That's what I know." I wanted to defend myself to explain, but I realized something important. They'd controlled the narrative. I was the villain in their story, the ungrateful daughter who abandoned her family. The truth, the $866,000, the exploitation, the mockery didn't matter. They'd made me the bad guy. "I love you, Grandma," I said, kissing her forehead. "But there are things you don't know." She patted my hand, her skin papery and thin. "Then maybe you should tell people your side, baby." I took my grandmother's advice. I posted a detailed account on social media, not for revenge but for truth. I included the invoices, the timeline, the overheard conversation. I was factual, not emotional. I didn't call them names or make accusations beyond what I could prove. The response was overwhelming. Friends I'd lost touch with reached out. "I always wondered why you lived so modestly on your salary," one wrote. "Now it makes sense." Colleagues who'd noticed my financial stress offered support. Even strangers on Reddit, where I'd cross-posted my story, shared their own experiences of family financial abuse. But the most shocking response came from my Aunt Teresa, my mother's younger sister. She called me directly, her voice shaking. "Lorna, I need to tell you something I should have said years ago." "What is it, Auntie?" "Your mother. She did the same thing to me. 20 years ago, when I got my first good job, she convinced me to buy her a car to help with bills to support the family. I gave her over $100,000 before I finally said no. She didn't speak to me for 3 years. I felt like I'd been punched. Why didn't you warn me? I tried once, remember? When you first bought the house. I pulled you aside and said, be careful about mixing family and money. You said, it's different with me. I want to help. I did remember. I thought she was being cynical, jealous even. I'm so sorry, Auntie. Don't apologize to me, baby. I'm calling to tell you that you did the right thing. Your mother is my sister and I love her, but she has a pattern. She finds the most successful child or sibling and bleeds them dry while telling them it's love. After we hung up, I sat in my apartment processing this revelation. It wasn't just me. I wasn't crazy or overreacting. This was a pattern, a cycle of manipulation that had been going on for decades. As the 90-day deadline approached, the manipulation intensified. First came the medical emergencies. My father's diabetes suddenly worsened. He was in the ER and they needed money for treatment. I called the hospital directly. He'd been treated and released, fully covered by his Medicare. It was a lie. Then my mother claimed she'd been fired from her part-time job, retaliation, she said, for taking time off to deal with family stress I'd caused. I called her employer. She'd quit 3 weeks earlier without notice. Alvin showed up at my apartment at 2 a.m., drunk and belligerent. You're really going to do this? He screamed through my door. You're going to make Mom and Dad homeless? I called the police. Watching my brother being escorted away by officers broke something in me. But I also knew that if I gave in now, if I showed even a crack in my resolve, I'd be trapped forever. The emotional terrorism peaked when my mother sent me a video message. She was crying, makeup running down her face, sitting in her bedroom, the one with the furniture I'd bought. I don't understand what I did to deserve this, she sobbed. I gave birth to you, raised you, sacrificed everything, and this is how you repay me? By throwing us away like garbage. I watched it once, then deleted it. Because I'd finally understood something crucial. She believed her own story. In her mind, she was the victim. She genuinely couldn't see the exploitation, the entitlement, the decade of taking advantage of my love. To acknowledge it would require a level of self-awareness she didn't possess. That realization didn't make it hurt less. It actually made it hurt more. The house sold quickly. A young family excited for their first home, grateful for the renovations I'd done. My parents moved into a modest 2-bedroom apartment, something they could actually afford on their Social Security and my father's pension. They didn't speak to me through the entire moving process. 3 months after everything imploded, my mother was diagnosed with stage 4 ovarian cancer. My Aunt Teresa called me, her voice heavy. I thought you should know. I went to the hospital despite everything. She was smaller than I remembered, frail in the hospital bed, tubes and wires connecting her to machines. When she saw me, her eyes filled with tears, but not joy. Are you happy now? She whispered. Mama, don't. You stressed me so much I got sick. The doctors said stress can cause cancer. This is your fault. Even then, even dying, she couldn't take responsibility. Couldn't acknowledge what she'd done. Part of me wanted to scream at her, to force her to see the truth. But I realized it didn't matter anymore. I couldn't make her understand. I couldn't force an apology or acknowledgement. I held her hand anyway. I love you, Mama. I always did. I just couldn't let you destroy me. She turned away from me, and those were the last words we ever exchanged. She died 6 weeks later, and at her funeral I was treated like a murderer. Alvin wouldn't look at me. Jade actually said, I hope you can live with yourself. My father's words were the ones that destroyed me. She asked for you at the end. She wanted to tell you she was sorry. But you'd already left. I hadn't left. I'd been there. But in the narrative they'd constructed, I was always the one who abandoned them, never the one who'd been exploited, mocked, and discarded. Standing at her grave, I finally let myself completely break. I'd won my freedom, established my boundaries, reclaimed my life. But the cost was everything. My family, my mother's last days, any chance of reconciliation or closure. I'd wanted them to understand. I'd wanted validation, acknowledgement, an apology. Instead, I got grief without resolution, freedom without peace. I'd learned independence exactly as my mother told me to. But God, I'd never imagined independence would feel so much like loneliness. I still live in my small apartment. I've rebuilt my savings, over $200,000 in just these few months. I've started therapy, working through the guilt and grief and anger. Some days I'm proud of what I did. Other days I wonder if boundaries were worth the cost. My grandmother told me before she passed last month, "You did what you had to do, baby girl. Don't let guilt steal your peace. Your mama loved you, but love without respect is just control." I'm learning that she was right. I'm learning that being a good daughter didn't require destroying myself. I'm learning that sometimes the people who hurt us most are the ones we love most deeply. But I'm also learning that some prices once paid can never be refunded. Some relationships once broken can't be repaired. And sometimes doing the right thing doesn't lead to a happy ending. It just leads to truth. If this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe for more real-life stories about family, boundaries, and learning to choose yourself. Have you ever been taken advantage of by family? Share your story in the comments. Sometimes knowing we're not alone is the first step to healing. And remember, you are not obligated to set yourself on fire to keep others warm. The money doesn't matter anymore. What matters is that I finally learned the difference between love and obligation, between helping and being exploited, between family loyalty and self-destruction. I learned independence. Just not the kind my mother had in mind. And in the quiet of my apartment, surrounded by the life I'm finally building for myself, I'm learning to live with that truth. Even though it tastes like ashes and regret, even though it cost me almost everything I held dear. Some lessons come with a price. Mine cost $866,000 and my mother's last words. I just hope it was worth it.